essentially, I think that sport can be an incredible teacher. And I think it can be an incredible unifier. It brings people together. You don't have to speak the same language. You don't have to practice the same religion. And I think what we're seeing right now is this separation. And I am hopeful that sport is something that can bring people together.
Hey, everybody. We've had some of the most incredible guests coming to you these past couple of months. The amount of expertise and knowledge on these cutting edge topics is something we really hope that you enjoy. And if you do, it would make a huge difference to us if you could rate, review, and subscribe the podcast. It helps us to get more guests, better experts, and talk about all of the things that are really important to you. So give us a love, give us a lot of love, and don't forget to subscribe so you get all our new episodes. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I'm Rachel, and I got another amazing guest for you. Jamie Mittelman is here today, and she is the founder of seriously one of the most important and amazing. Your work is just what it's doing for women is just really, it just stopped me in my tracks. And I knew we had to talk to you because it's really incredible. She is the founder of Flame Bearers, and I'll let her discuss that in a little bit. But Jamie, I just want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. I'm so excited to be here. I love what you do. I love Thick Thighs Save Lives. So pumped for this conversation.
They sure do. You guys, Flame Bearers is the very first global storytelling platform celebrating the stories of women Olympians and Paralympians. And getting the word out there on these incredible women is just the work that we need. And it's so important for our daughters, and it's so important for our, it's just the implications are so far reaching. And I just want to thank you for all that you've done, because you've gotten, household names out there. You've gotten unsung heroes out there. You highlight the stories of successes, the struggles, and important social issues that are really driving some of the world's most prestigious athletes. And so I want to give you a chance to kind of introduce Flame Bearers to our audience and tell us why. Why is it important to tell the stories of women Olympians and Paralympians?
Totally. So Flame Bearers is the world's first media and production company that specifically champions the stories of the best female athletes in the world. And this is really important because media coverage, I think, is very much a misnomer. 85% of sports media coverage goes to men. And of that 15% of women, 15% of media coverage that does go to women athletes, it pretty much goes to a very narrow portion of the pie. In general, white able-bodied women from the global north who play soccer or basketball. Now, I'm not going to knock on that. I was a soccer player in college. I love that. But I think that we can broaden the aperture. We can think more expansively about who is a female athlete and who deserves to be given that platform. So we give voice to women from around the world, of all sports, of all abilities, of all religions, walks of life, because we believe it's really important to have role models who look and sound like you. I remember growing up, some of my greatest role models were soccer players. And that's because the U.S. women's national soccer team from 1999 had just won the World Cup. I could see them, I could watch them on television, I could go to their parade. And we want to be a part of providing those role models for little girls all over the world, because we really believe that if you can see it, if you can hear it, you can be it.
The importance of the mirror image and how far we have come, but how far we still have to go in providing role models that look and sound like you.
Yeah.
The work is just, it's so important, but like you said, I've never heard that stat before, that 85-15. I mean, I see it every
Right.
day, but hearing it is so staggering. And then to know that on top of that, that 15% is primarily from
Mhm.
one major cultural and racial
Totally.
group, it's tough.
It's really tough. And then on top of the quantity problem, there's also a serious quality problem. So, how women athletes are having their stories told. Often, a lot of women athlete stories are co opted, they are talked about in a sexualized manner. They're focusing on things like their outfits, who their partners are, for example, as opposed to, the athlete, the incredible fitness that we are, what we're seeing them do as a competitor. We're seeing with athletes who are black and brown or have a disability this portrayal through what I like to call the pity brush. So it's the sense that their story is so pitiable that it's such a source of inspiration when that narrative doesn't ring true to the athlete themselves. So there's the quality issue that I think is just as equally important as the quantity issue. So we try to address both.
Oh man, what a massive
It's a lot.
job. Because we are not we are not there. I think that is such an important point that you brought up too, about the little coverage. And we were just talking to we've talked to former Olympians, and we've talked to former professional athletes, women, and every single one has reported having her story either sexualized or
Yep.
just like grossly. We just talked to a runner a couple of weeks ago, an Olympic runner, who said that her weight was like the leading topic in any
It's so
reporting
frustrating.
of her. Like it was it, and she developed an eating disorder.
Of course. Of course. What do you think is going to happen to people when the headlines are around nitpicky things that, I mean, I've never seen a headline about a male athlete like about their weight ever, unless they were a
Never.
wrestler and they were cutting weight, but definitely not in running. Absolutely not.
It's wild. It's and so there's a huge need. And I want to know about your sort of personal connection to sport. I know that you mentioned that you were a soccer player and how important it was for you to see the women's World Cup champions
Yeah.
growing up. But tell us a little bit about your personal connection to sports and why it kind of led you to this path of flame bearers.
Sure. So, first of all, I definitely don't wear the athlete hat when talking to literally the best athletes in the world.
Just an
But
amateur.
yes,
Just
literally, I'm like, yes, JV over here. Come to me for my expertise in communications and marketing, not for my ability to compete internationally. Growing up for me, sport was one of my greatest sources of joy. It's where I found a lot of happiness. It's also where I had some of my greatest and most awkward and cringeworthy moments. Essentially, I think that sport can be an incredible teacher, and I think it can be an incredible unifier. It brings people together. You don't have to speak the same the same language. You don't have to practice the same religion. And I think what we're seeing right now in our country and the world is this separation. And I am hopeful that sport is something that can bring people together. For me, my dad was my young soccer coach when I was a little girl, and I had unfortunately lost my dad about 7 years ago to brain cancer. And I realized that in my professional career, I had very much been playing it safe, and that I was, doing very well, but I hadn't been taking risks. And after losing my dad, I had this kind of aha moment where I said, "This is not a dress rehearsal. We have one shot at this thing called life, and I want to swing for the fences. And hey, if I strike out, that's okay. At least I'm in the arena. At least I went up to bat." And I realized that I wanted to marry my two passions. So I had had about a decade of professional experience in the communications marketing space, and then had a ton of relationships in the sporting space just because of personal relationships where I had gone to school, etc. And I said, you know what if I can make this my full-time job? Was not the plan originally starting out. I thought this was going to be an internship, ended up taking off, and has, 5 years later, I've never looked back. But that's how I got here.
Oh, wow. That is incredible. And how, I mean, not to make you emotional, but how
Yeah.
proud would he be that he was the source of, push for you to say, what am I doing? What am I doing to change the world today? What am I doing to feed my passions and to grow and to contribute and to go off and chase that? That's quite a legacy for your dad.
Thank you. Thank you. It's absolutely terrifying for me sometimes when I look in the mirror and I'm like, wow, this is very different than what I expected myself to be doing. At the same time, it does light me up. And I see the impact that we're having when we get to we've worked with about 275 different Olympians and Paralympians from 55 countries. No one's doing that work. That is so cool. And it matters to the athletes themselves, let alone the community that we're building.
It so matters. It so matters. That's amazing. So for our listeners who might not know, can you explain the difference between an Olympian and a Paralympian? And how do the Special Olympics fit into this? Do you do any work in that arena?
Such a good question, something we get asked all the time. So the Paralympics literally means parallel to the Olympics. So essentially, it is a similar movement to the Olympics, but for athletes with physical disabilities. These are elite athletes. This is one of the common misunderstandings of the Paralympics is that they are less than, that they are not serious competitors. Paralympians are elite world class athletes with physical disabilities. Special Olympics is a totally separate organization, nonprofit that works with individuals with physical disabilities. We have not yet worked with that organization. I have nothing but the utmost respect for them. But no, to date, we've only worked with the Olympics and the Paralympics. So focusing on elite athletes within those movements.
That's amazing. Who have been now, as we said, you have talked to athletes in 55 countries. I mean, Olympians, Paralympians, all different kinds of sports.
Yeah.
What have been some of your favorite stories? Who have you kind of loved? I know it's like picking your children,
Yeah,
like
totally. I will give two examples. I'll give one who's more of a household name and then one who people probably haven't heard of. We had the opportunity to work with Sue Bird. So, for those who don't know Sue, she is one of the most well respected basketball players in the world who recently retired. And what I loved about our conversation with Sue is so many people have interviewed her, but we focused on who she is as a person and what her why is and what motivates her. And she was talking about her nieces and how they are her sources of joy, and that is why she's so committed to women's sports, and that is why she goes and she signs autographs after games. And I think for me it was really cool to give voice to some part of an individual who people feel like they know a lot about, but this is a really key part of what motivates her every day. So that was really special to me. Another athlete that I like to elevate is Massimo Alizada. Total other end of the spectrum in terms of level of fame. She's from Afghanistan. She's on the Olympic refugee team, which is interesting. A lot of people don't know that there is an Olympic refugee team. Her dream growing up was to compete in the Tour de France. She's a cyclist. And growing up in Afghanistan, she was not supposed to bike ride as a woman. So she would dress up as a man and have a male ride in front of her and behind her because it's not safe for a woman to go out bike riding in Afghanistan. And sometimes when cars would pass by her, if they would realize that that's not actually a man, they would verbally assault her, they would throw things at her. And she showed up day after day doing this. Her dream came true. She was able to later compete in the Tour de France Femmes, which is the female version, compete in the Olympics, went on to become the chef de maison, which is essentially the head of the Olympic refugee team. And every single time she gets interviewed, yes, she shares her story, but she really, really focuses on the situation of Afghan women right now today because she says she got out of the country. There's a lot of women who are being voiceless, who are stuck in really horrific conditions, and she uses her platform for the betterment of all. So I like to share them because I think that it gives a good perspective of the variety and the breadth of athletes that we work with.
I mean, the resolve of any athlete to
Wild.
get to, you know, a pinnacle place of their sport. And it's, I mean, I think we talked to Jackie Stiles a couple of months ago, and she's famous for her, 1,000 shots a day. And
Totally.
these are people that their commitment level is so beyond.
Totally.
But then you introduce a person that is literally not allowed to do the thing that they want to do. I mean, it's one thing to be unbelievably committed. It's another thing to go completely against the grain.
Yeah, totally.
That is, I mean, people throwing things at her, but her dream and her goal just being bigger than any of that.
Absolutely. I also had the chance to work with Alexa Moreno. She's a gymnast from Mexico. She is the highest ranking gymnast in Mexican history. She came in fourth in the vault in Tokyo. And she said, Jamie, in the elite training facility in Mexico, I fell through the floor. And this is not funny. It's just the craziness of that. This is the best gymnast in the country's history, and these are the conditions in which she's training in. It opens the aperture for what it means to be an elite female athlete around
Yes.
the world, because being an elite female athlete, and there's not a better, worse, there's no judgment here, but the experiences are vastly different. And I think it's important to give voice to all of them.
Yeah, the just getting that out there, that the experiences are so different, because as you said, so many, women in the United States have sort of a view of, and again, certainly it's not the kinds of resources that are available to men, but the resources
Right.
that are available to you know a woman athlete that shows a lot of talent in the United States, it's different. It's
It
not
is.
like that everywhere.
It is different. It is different. Alejandra Abar, she was the first female Paralympic swimmer from the Dominican Republic. She made the comparison to me. I asked her, she was talking about the resources as an elite athlete from a developing nation. And she said, Jamie, it's different. And I said, can you help me understand? I'm from the US. Help me understand the difference. How would you compare for someone who is not from the Dominican Republic, who has not walked your walk? Help me understand. And she said, okay, it's like you take a long overnight flight, and some athletes get to fly first class. They're able to recline their seats. They're able to be served nice food. And then other athletes are sitting at the back in economy, where they're uncomfortable the whole time. They're having to pay for every single uh, beverage and food. And then she said the next day, you go up and you run the same race. So you get to the same starting point, but the point is how you get there is vastly different. And again, this is not a knock on individuals who have those resources at all. It's just the idea that the starting points and how you get there is vastly different.
Just the recognition of that, I think, is really all that is so necessary. And when we're thinking about, women athletes in the United States and the lack of coverage and the lack of resources that they have in comparison to their male counterparts in
Yep.
the same sport. Now let's take that outside of the United States to somewhere like the Dominican. How much more difficult is it to be a woman athlete in a less developed nation?
There's nothing. There's nothing. So I wouldn't be surprised if that number was definitely in the single digits and very, very low. And then if you add on top of that the fact that if you are a para athlete, so an athlete with a physical disability, the coverage is pretty much non-existent, and the infrastructure is pretty much non-existent. That's why Alejandra in Tokyo, so 2020, was the first female Paralympic swimmer in her country's history. She was the first, and this is 5 years ago. So we are making progress, which is huge. there's still a long way to go. And I think we can hold both of those simultaneously. We can say, yes, Paris was the first time in history that we reached gender parity. So we had equal numbers of male and female competitors. The Paralympics were not even close, but no one talks about that. So we can celebrate, and we should acknowledge the progress we've made. I think it's also important to take a step back and say, okay, we're making progress. Yeah, there's still a lot of progress to still be done.
Quick interruption, guys. We are always talking about the importance of community to help you along your journey, to keep you motivated, to surround you with like-minded people. And we have a massive, massive community to do just that. If you haven't already, get in our fitness group on Facebook, Fitness Programming by CVG. Get on our app, CVG Nation. We've got hundreds of thousands of women on there who are just waiting to cheer you on. And we cannot wait to meet you. Get with us on our channels. We love to see you there. Given the fact that we've talked about a lot of the differences between international and athletes from the United States, and the sort of different paths they take to get to a similar place. Can you think about some unifying forces that you kind of see constant binding all of the female athletes that you're talking about, despite language differences,
Yep.
cultural norms? Like, are there things that unify women athletes that you see?
Absolutely. And this is one of the coolest parts of my job, honestly, is that I just get to bear witness and elevate. And in doing so, I kind of feel like a fly on the wall, and I jot down trends and things that I notice that are similar across regions and religions and et cetera. One of them is this sense of community. So it's the idea that people get to the Olympics or the Paralympics or the highest levels of sport with a community around them. It could be their family, it could be their friends, it could be their coaches. Define community however you want. But the idea is that every athlete who we see on the world stage has got there with the support of others. And women athletes in particular tend to be the first to call that out. I had the opportunity to work with Katarina Roxon. She's a Paralympian from Canada. And she said when she was on the Paralympic podium, she envisioned her family around her. So on TV, we just see her getting the medal. But in her mind, it's her village behind her that is getting that reward with her. So number one is this sense of community, and that no athlete is an island. They get to where they are with the support of other people, and they're very eager to point that out, I think. Number two would be this sense, and you mentioned it before, it's this ability to have crystal clear goals and to one-mindedly work towards that. So I think it's hard to describe, but essentially it is a prioritization of that goal. And with that comes sacrifices, of course, but this is what's going to happen. And going above, going around, going below, if there's a blockade in your way, to make it happen. And I think that's something that elite athletes, male or female, have. It's this singular determination that you want to reach an endpoint and you're going to do it. And then, let's see, there was definitely another one, but it's escaping me right now. I will mention it when it comes back. There's always 3 points, and I'm forgetting the last one.
No worries at all. I think when we talk about something like the unification forces behind, the community of women,
Yeah,
it's just, there are so many facets there, and there are so many different doors to open, because seemingly we all have this commonality of being the 15%, not getting the coverage, having our weight lead off, any of our accolades. And I think that is sort of universally felt.
totally. And I think that there's a massive opportunity where we as women can approach things from an abundance mindset and not a scarcity mindset, that there is enough coverage obviously their coverage is not enough, but me getting covered does not mean that you do not get covered, that we all rise together. And I think that that is one of the things that I'm noticing, given that I've talked to multiple generations of athletes, is that athletes these days are increasingly having that abundance mindset. And it makes me so, so excited.
That is really exciting. When that kind of catches fire too, I think that the possibilities for elevating these kind of athletes become very exciting.
Absolutely. And it just keeps snowballing. Everyone wants to jump in and be a part of it.
That's so amazing. Um, I wanted to, you've done a lot of interviews, you've talked to a lot of incredible people. Was there anyone along the way in your years of doing this that really just broke your heart? Like, is there a story that you can kind of call on and tell us about that really had a significant impact on you as a person?
Yes. Um, I would caveat that and say that every single athlete I work with, the way we produce this work, I almost feel like they are love letters, like love audio, love videos to these letters, to these athletes, because I'm obsessed with all of them in different ways. The athlete who I would like to call out is Rita Asimwe of Uganda. I would first like to say that Rita doesn't want anyone ever feeling bad for her. She has had a tough go, but she is the first one to say, I want everyone to treat me like the same old Rita that I used to be. So that's a direct quote. But I think what I took from Rita's story, and I'll get into that, is this sense of determination, is this sense of not wanting people to take your story and co-opt it, and really the importance of telling her story in her words. So Rita is born in Uganda, was at her grandmother's house and with her family, and thieves broke into the house. She went towards them, distracted them, and they chased her out of the house with a machete, hacked off her right hand, and she woke up in a pool of blood without a right hand. She had grown up a righty, so she had to essentially make her way to a hospital. Uh, they said she was lucky to survive, and then relearn everything with her left hand. She today is the number one para badminton player in all of Africa. She had to go back to school, obviously, and in that environment, people are staring at her, and she was the first one to say, "Nope, I'm the same person. Treat me the same." Went back into all the same physical activities that she was before. And I think she's an incredible role model of resilience, and also an incredible verbal advocate for people portraying individuals with disabilities in a very particular way. So, not portraying them as sources of inspiration because of their disability, but because of their mentality and the athletic achievements they've accomplished.
That's a really important mind shift, I think, when people are thinking about and highlighting and elevating Paralympians. It's there's a real sense there of it could go into a direction of sort of pity,
Totally.
the thing that you've done with being able to highlight these stories, to tell these stories with the backdrop of these athletes are using their words to tell you who they are,
Yeah.
and we aren't, you know, highlighting this woman as, you know, the machete victim.
Right. Exactly. 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 And something that's also different is every athlete has complete sign off. So, for example, say I do mess up, they can say, Rita can say, Jamie, I don't like this, redo it. And we will. And that is why it's so important to us that we don't take their words out of context, that we don't publish a headline focusing on weight, because we've built up this sense of trust with the athletes where they feel like we are fairly representing who they are.
With regards to the women that you've talked to, um, when it comes to their portrayal in the media, if they are garnering any media attention, have you found any similarities in the way that women feel they are being misportrayed in the media?
Absolutely. Totally. So the big one, and you mentioned it, is number one, if they are being covered. Number two is definitely sexualization. So oftentimes when it comes to video work, there was a study done where how men and women are videoed is different. So in general, camera crew zoom in on parts of women's bodies in different ways. When people write stories about women, they talk about their physique, they talk about their marital status, for example. It could be as simple as using words like girl as opposed to athlete or woman and talking about a man. Differences in commentators in terms of if they use their first name or their first name and last name. In general, people will always use first name only of women athletes versus first and last or just last of men. So people will talk about Simone, but they won't really talk about a male athlete with a first name only basis in general. So there's all these key different different ways that people can kind of belittle or take power away. I think a lot of them are unintentional. So I think what we try to do is to try to raise awareness for them. Some of them are always, of course, going to be not coming from a great place, but I think in general, people are trying to do good. But those are a couple of different specific ways that coverage is different.
Wow, that was really eye-opening to me. Those are really minor, seemingly minor
Totally.
differences that I had never really considered.
Right? Uh-huh.
But those are, you're so right. Speaking about an athlete and using only their first name is sort of an informality. It's almost like you
Totally.
know them, they're your buddy, right?
Totally.
And it doesn't garner a level of respect that would
Exactly.
be there if you were talking about someone and just referring to their last name.
Totally. 100%. Or the use of girls in the sense of talking about them as girl athletes when they're a 25-year-old woman, using the word play as opposed to compete, for example.
That's
That was
so
a big one
interesting.
that the Paralympics highlighted this past year. They want to be known as athletes competing, not individuals playing.
It's seemingly a small
Right?
distinction, but when you actually think about it, it's
Exactly.
massive. It's massive. The way you read that, the way you absorb that as a listener or a person observing is so different.
Totally different.
Wow, that's really important. And this is the kind of stuff that I think is really important when we start highlighting like how we can do better and how
Totally.
yeah, this is these small things. We had a as I mentioned, we had an Olympian runner on a couple weeks ago and she had said that right away the media had nicknamed her the baby-faced killer.
Oh, nicknames are the worst. I literally, okay, yes, carry on.
And so she was like, there's so many issues with this. Starting at, first of all, you don't know me like that. So don't give me a nickname that I didn't
No.
choose. Secondly, the nickname has solely to do with my appearance.
Yeah, totally.
It didn't have anything to do with her ability. It was how she looked, like how she appeared. She said that to the media, she appeared younger than she actually was. And so,
That's so annoying. In a similar way, I worked with Jodie Williams, who's a three-time Olympian from Great Britain, and she said the media always gave her horrible nicknames that had nothing to do with anything that she liked. Is usually something that rhymed or something catchy that had no connection to her whatsoever, and that it's insulting. You're reading about yourself, and they just totally miss the story. And then if you push back, you're seen as ungrateful.
that's the next point I was going to bring up to you is the fact of getting any coverage, of getting a nickname. It's almost like as a women athlete, you should
Read
be
it. Be grateful.
thankful.
Totally.
Just I'm just thankful I'm getting covered. I'm just thankful anyone cares. And how dare you, sort of spin it in a way that I shouldn't call you a girl when you're a 30-year-old woman. Because really I wrote about you, and isn't that really good enough?
Totally. It's so messed up. And I think we have a long way to go. And I think athletes who are starting to say, I don't like that, are really help pushing the needle, especially because there's such a strong fan base around them. I think that we've seen this with a lot of different athletes that when an athlete does push back and says, I don't like that, if they have a strong community of support, oftentimes through social media, through sponsorships, they're able to gain some traction. So I love that because we're seeing more power in the hands of the athletes themselves.
Yes, and just paving the way. And as you said, a commonality for women is that sense of community and working in the sense of the better good. And so like being those first athletes to say things like, hey, no, 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 we're going to actually talk about what I can do, as the headline, that, paving the way in that is what we need to see. So you already know we make the best workout gear, but one of our best products, our highest rated product on our website, is actually our collagen. If you have not heard about Glow Up by CVG, you are missing out. There is almost 700 five-star reviews on this product because it is such an amazing supplement. Actually, looking at it today, there are only 2 one-stars that were meant to be 5 stars. They love the product, they hit the wrong amount of stars. This is one of our most popular products for a reason. It dissolves like no other collagen. It's type 1 and 3. You're gonna have healthier skin, better joint mobility. Everything about this collagen makes it easy to put into your daily routine. So if you haven't tried Glow Up, get on cvg.com and make sure to add it to cart today. It's our best product. Has there been a sport that you have really learned a lot about? I mean, I know you said your personal background is you kind
Yep.
of started as a soccer player, but there's such a vast variety of athletes that you've talked to in all
Yeah.
these kinds of different sports. What has been some of the most eye-opening conversations you've had surrounding new sports?
I've learned so many incredible sports, specifically within the para space. I was very much ignorant, honestly, before starting this work around para sports. So Claire Taggart, she is a world champion bocce athlete. So bocce is like it's the para version of bocce in the Paralympics, and it is, she called it the world's most inclusive sport. You have individuals of all abilities and disabilities competing, and how individuals throw the ball is different. But it was really, really cool for me to learn about that sport. Another one was sitting volleyball. So this is the Paralympic equivalent of able-bodied volleyball, traditional volleyball, as most people call it, though a lot of para athletes hate that terminology of traditional volleyball. It's where every athlete sits on the floor. So it doesn't matter if you have what your ability or your disability is. Everyone is sitting. And the core strength that takes is absolutely wild. I tried to play it one day and it was insanely humbling. So it's all these different para sports that I had no idea about before have been super cool for me to learn.
That's yeah. I've actually seen sitting volleyball. I was a
Okay.
former volleyball player, and so I was very interested in it and wanted to learn more about it. And you are so right. The amount of just strength in your midline that it
Yep.
takes, it's mind-boggling to watch the skills that they have. It's so unique and so incredible.
Totally. Totally. And it's really cool to see individuals of all different who all have totally different disabilities playing
Right.
on the same team. So you have an individual without a hand competing on the team with with a teammate who doesn't have a leg. And it's really really cool to see.
Yeah. In your experience, do the majority of the athletes, the para athletes that you talk to, are they having been born with a physical disability or having like had something later in life where they had already established that sport? I'm just wondering.
Total mix,
Yeah.
honestly. So a number of the athletes um, definitely born with their conditions. And a lot of the athletes were also serious able-bodied athletes. Something happened, they developed a disability, and then they have adapted to adaptive sports. But very much a mixed bag. And what's really cool is that as awareness for adaptive sports are spreading, more and more individuals are able to find it and say, oh, something happened to me, but I can still be a very serious athlete. And that's something that Dana Matthewson, a two-time Paralympic wheelchair tennis player, said to me. She said, Jamie, I just want more kids around the world to know that adaptive sports exist. If you have a disability, it doesn't mean that you can't be an athlete anymore.
Just to be able to look in that mirror again
Yes.
and see someone like you that reflected back. It's that's the work. That's the stuff we're doing. Um, just a side note too, I'm wondering, as far as because you do speak to such a wide variety of athletes from so many countries, are the majority of Olympians and Paralympians, are they doing this as their full-time job, or is this like, I work for a living and on my, off hours, I'm just going to the Olympics real quick?
It is absolutely wild. And I'm so glad you asked this question. The majority around the world are having to have secondary and tertiary jobs. In the U.S., it is largely different, um, especially for Olympians as opposed to Paralympians. The vast majority of Paralympians do have secondary and tertiary jobs, unless you are one of the few lucky sponsored individuals, which is really challenging. What we are seeing is increased sponsorship. But no, most people, most female athletes around the world cannot live on that salary. And even people in the professional women's soccer leagues, in the WNBA here in the United States, often can't get by on just doing that. My hope that is that one day it is enough to just be a world class athlete, that is a profession in and of itself. I just today we launched a podcast episode with Saman Soltani. She's an Olympic canoeist. She was on the Olympic refugee team and she lives in Austria. And she was telling me that she tries to explain that she is a world class athlete and that is her profession and that people don't get it. People just culturally don't understand. They said, okay, what do you do for work? And she says, no, I'm an athlete. And they say, okay, well, what's your job? And it's really insulting to someone who lives, breathes, sleeps this sport. So I'm hopeful that one day that will no longer be the case.
I mean, to live, breathe, and sleep a sport, you almost have to be doing that and
Yeah,
not, on the side just going to your day job really quick.
right.
I can't imagine. And we've seen this evolution, I think, in the United States, much slower,
Yeah,
with women athletes being able to be professionals. But talking about one of the most developed nations in the world, and we still do not have a situation where many WNBA players cannot survive off of their professional athlete salary, is just that's really eye opening.
absolutely. I also worked with Becky Sauerbrunn, who is the former captain of the U.S. women's national soccer team in the U.S. And she said, Jamie, it's insulting when we have won X World Cups, Y gold medals, and we're competing on subpar surfaces like turf. And I look to the male counter team who has, not won any of those accolades, and they're on significantly better ground. So it's the pay. It's also the conditions in which they train. We saw a number of years ago there was a viral post during the WNBA around the locker rooms and the weight rooms, the conditions, the contrast between the the WNBA weight room, which was literally a rack of barbells, and then the insane weightlifting room that men had. So it's also the conditions that set athletes up for success. And if you don't have the resources to push yourself, the data to track the coaches who are going to make you the best you can be, you're not going to get to that elite level.
Speaking on that for a second, because that statement alone is, I think, what so many women want to see changed for future generations, of having those resources available to be able to choose the path that you want to go in and not be hampered by anything that doesn't have to do with your ability. Um, can you talk about some of the resources that you see in your international athletes and what they are able to get by on while still competing on an international stage?
Yeah. So Hassan, Kukun, I cannot pronounce her last name. I always feel horrible. I believe it's Kukundakwe. She is from Uganda. She was the youngest para athlete in the Tokyo Paralympics. She swam at the local pool, which was significantly shorter than an Olympic sized pool. And this is how she trained for the Tokyo Paralympics. So her mom, because at this time I believe she was 14 years old, would drive her to the local community pool, and that's where she would train. Now this is significantly shorter, so every repetition is and every lap is vastly different than what it would be on the Paralympic stage. So when she got to the Paralympics, she was like, "Wow, this is really different than the pool I've been practicing in." I mentioned Alexa Moreno falling through the floorboards of her training facility, the number one training facility in Mexico. She has a dream to now produce the top gym in the world and have it be based in Mexico. That's what she wants to do. She wants to take her experience as an athlete who suffered with subpar facilities and flip it on its head and say, you know what? No, I want Mexico to be a haven for athletes around the world. I want them to want to go to Mexico because our training conditions are so good. And then we heard about Becky, here in the United States, where we think things are peachy, where we think things are great. And you have one of the best athletes in the world openly saying, no, we are being asked to compete on subpar surfaces. We got to do a lot better.
We got to do a lot better. It's just so inspirational though to hear that where these women have goals to take these inequities. I mean, wanting to turn Mexico
Right?
into the haven. I mean, I know Olympians are known for and Paralympians are known for dreaming big, because you've got to dream big. But these are just the ways that they want to give back to the sport, to the community, to the future generations. Is just, you have an amazing job that you get to talk to these people.
I think I'm the luckiest person in the world, honestly. And I always like to be very clear that they have done the hard work. They're the ones doing the change. Alexa is the one going out, Husta's going out every day. Becky is fighting for those things. I'm literally just giving them the mic and amplifying their words. So yes, I'm very lucky, but they're the ones who deserve all the credit.
So, I want to give our listeners an opportunity to hear more from these incredible women, to get to hear their stories. Where can they find you? Where can they connect with your athletes?
Sure. So flamebearers.com. So flame as in the thing in the Olympic torch, and then bearers as in the people who bear the flame. You can also find all of our interviews in video format on our YouTube channel or on all podcasting platforms. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on all social media platforms for behind the scenes content. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, you name it, we're there. And what I would say is is if there's anything that resonated with you today, I'd love to hear from you. I'm very much an open book. Reach out. My email is jamie@flamebearers.com, and I would love to find a way to work with you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. If any of our listeners out there, it's not just a way to just like lift up your day and be completely inspired, although it is that, but it's such, listening to any of these women's stories is just such a way to connect with other women with unbelievable goals and resolve, and it's so much more than just inspiration that you need to continue on your day. It is just deep connections with other women who are doing incredible things. So thank you so much, Jamie.
Thanks for having me, Rachel. I loved this conversation.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thank you for coming on.